Welcome, everybody. My name is Matt Pearsall. I'm the community manager for the Second Step programs and Committee for Children. And I am really glad to be able to welcome you all to the latest installment in our Second Step Educator Spotlight series. Before we begin, I'd like to start with a land acknowledgement. Committee for Children's offices sit on the unceded traditional lands of the Coast Salish peoples, specifically the first people of Seattle, Washington, the Duwamish tribe. As we honor the Duwamish people and their ancestors, it's also important that we consider our place our place in the past, present, and future history of the Indigenous peoples of our region, as well as how we can best support them. Thank you. Now, I am very pleased to introduce you all to Sarah Gamradt, Assistant Principal in the Berwyn South School District outside of Chicago, Illinois. Sarah is going to join us and tell us about the work that she is doing in supporting student social emotional learning. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to be here.
So, I always like to start these out with just like a little get to know you. How did you become a social emotional learning educator? You know, educators teach social emotional learning all the time, but there's kind of a point where you go, oh, this is a thing I do. When was that moment for you?
So this is my 21st year in education. I think that everybody's got their story, and I think it's really important that you always share your story with your staff and your students. And my aha moment was it wasn't necessarily one moment, right? It was I was and always will be a middle school educator. For 15 years, I taught social studies. And I think just being in that field of social studies really lent itself to providing opportunities for students to really dive into events in history, solution finding and problem solving, making connections to things that have happened in the past to things that have happened today, as well as making those connections to the world that they live in, right? So, as adults, we can say, we live in this big, circular world, and now that we have the ability to speak with and see others from across the country, it makes it a little bit different. And I think that when I realized that I wanted to really focus on SEL was when I started a group, an organization that many of you may be aware of, and that was OAV. I didn't start it. I became a facilitator at the middle school level, and that was a way for me to be.
What is OAV? I am not familiar with it.
Great. So it stands for Our American Voice.
Huh.
It is, I know that at least in the past, it was in Illinois as well as Arizona. It's a way for students to make connections with our democracy and our government. It also is a way for them to understand that they have a voice before they can vote. Right. So it makes connections with their community, their local community, which can be starting a project at the school level, can be, creating or developing a project for their town, state, worldwide, whatever they choose to do. But it's utilizing lessons that OAV provides and then making that connection. From there, I was then asked to be an SEL Second Step champion for the middle school at that time, and walked through the 3-day, boy, this was a long time ago, walked through the 3-day training where I was then the champion over at the middle school level. And that just really, Second Step provided those opportunities for me to then fulfill that passion for SEL and for the whole child.
So this would have been back, if you were doing middle school years ago, this would have been with the big notebooks, the big middle school notebooks.
Oh yeah, the binders. Oh yeah, the paper. Yeah, binders. Yeah, absolutely. This was prior to having everything, having everything online. So I've run the gauntlet, I think.
I appreciate you kind of starting as a social studies teacher and kind of seeing and then finding connections to social emotional learning through that. That's kind of similar to my own journey, as I was a social studies teacher myself, and then sort of discovered social emotional learning and went, oh, wait a minute, there's all these connections. And I can see how this is a lot like the work that I was doing as a social studies teacher.
Absolutely.
I appreciate that. So what are you working on now? What are some things that you are doing right now that are cool or awesome that you're doing to support your students' social emotional learning?
Oh man, I am so thrilled to have the opportunity to talk about just all the great things that are happening. I don't necessarily have just one. I have to say that I've had a great opportunity over the last couple of years to become a co-facilitator or head of our SEL committee. It starts here in District 100 as your PBIS committee, and here at our school at Kamensky, we've been able to turn that into more of a student wellness, or I think just overall student and staff wellness committee, because this year, using data from last year, working with our PBIS committee leaders, we've been able to determine that we want the overall culture of the school to feel like it's not just something that we add. It's not just in addition to, but we wanted to integrate the program that we already had in place, right? Second Step's here. It's a program that we want to use, but how do we integrate that along with the other resources and just really create an overall mindset, right, of student wellness. So with that in mind, right, this overall umbrella, we began this year by giving our classroom teachers an overview of how that's going to work out. And I was able to start the year by, we provide that scope and sequence of Second Step that helps them see and determine where the lessons are going to take place. And along with that, the Second Steps lessons, right, teach those foundational skills, but then showing how when we utilize the Second Step lessons along with the reinforcers, how does that fit in with PBIS? And it was almost like, it's so interconnected. And once we began to do that, we now have the universal language of words like how to calm down and empathy and problem solving skills. You should hear in all the common areas, right? So PBIS focuses on the common areas. Well, so does Second Step, where when we teach those lessons in our classroom, how then can our students practice their social skills in the real settings? And to them, real is lunch, right? Recess. We call them specials, like PE and music. And then you begin to hear the dialogue taking place. We also started the school year giving our grade level some collaboration time to develop and start planning, right? How, I think that as educators, we're always balancing all these things that we can. And oftentimes, we're assessed on academics, right? And we know as educators that first and foremost, right, we need to make sure our students can bloom. And the only way they can bloom is with, these SEL lessons, but we just don't have time to plan. So we started the beginning of the year saying, here's a template, here's a way that you can plan. We already have embedded into our schedules a time, a morning meeting time for our students to come in and get settled and develop those that positive classroom culture. And within that, just providing that opportunity for our teachers to get together and to collaborate, just like we do for academics, for math and ELA and social studies. How can they share some things that are happening in their classroom? We've got new teachers. We've got teachers that have done Second Step for many, many years. And how can they get together and share some ideas? I think too that we have been very intentional about including social emotional learning in our Second Step program in our vision. Our vision for learning includes providing a safe space for our students, and that safe, brave space for learning. It's directly related to some of the skills that our students are learning. For example, I want to give a shout out to a teacher about a month ago, visibly seeing this working, right? About a month ago, I was walking through the hallway and a teacher was singing along with the second grade student the how to calm down song from the second grade curriculum. This was helping him because he was attuned and aware of the song because they're using it in the classroom. And then he was able to practice it, outside the four walls of the classroom in hopes, right? And we have to, as professionals, be confident that our students will understand that they can relate those songs, those phrases outside of the classroom in their problem solving steps. We're also,
Mhm.
this is so exciting. It's so fun.
Got a lot going
Because
on.
it's all interrelated,
Yeah, yeah.
right? We also have an attendance committee here as
Mhm.
well. And, it's directly related to students wanting to come to school,
Mhm.
right? So as our attendance committee works and looks at the data of attendance and to see, individual students that might need some support outside of school, but also how do we use that tier one support of celebrations, right?
Mm.
When you're here, and especially when you're here and you're on time, that's when the second step
Mm.
lessons are happening. That's when you get to practice with your peers, right? Some of the skills for learning and
Mhm.
so on. And then using that common language throughout the school day. You can't do it if you're not here. So I think that has definitely helped our
Oh,
attendance committee
so,
create some celebrations.
so you're putting your second step activities right first thing in the morning
Yes.
because that's a thing that your students are really engaged with and that encourages them to come.
Yes,
Oh,
absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's see what else.
Can I ask you a thing? Something?
Yeah,
Yeah. So
absolutely.
you mentioned briefly a student staff wellness committee.
Yes.
And I was wondering, can you talk a little bit more about that and what its role is and what in your work?
So, like I said before, we've had particular committees throughout the district, and one that District 100 finds credible, finds important, and we have data to back up some of the decisions that we make is what we called a PBIS committee. We have the different tiered committees here at Kamensky. We call it that, but overall, what we found using the data from surveys as well as from Second Step is that it's just our overall wellness
Mhm.
committee as well. The nurse provides opportunities too for the staff to be involved in wellness. Our PBIS committee supports not just the student wellness when you're considering using like a particular program of Second Step, but also each Wednesday I provide some anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes of some mindfulness activities
Mhm.
for our staff as well at our Wednesday meetings. Their ideas, their activities, their approaches that aren't necessarily just used with adults, but ways for our teachers to then feel that connectedness to
Mm.
their colleagues. And then they're encouraged to go back in and use it during, the 10-minute break after lunch or during morning meeting, right? Along with some of the reinforcers like the brain builders and such. They can also tuck in some mindfulness activities too that they can share with their classroom. I've even seen students leading mindfulness
Mm.
activities using, like a singing bowl with some breathing exercises, as well as leading some songs from Second Step too.
That's really awesome. I think that's you're doing amazing work.
I hope
You know
so.
that, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think what's so great is walking through
Yeah.
the hallways
Mhm.
and all my senses are turned on, right? I
Yeah.
see the differences happening.
Mhm.
I see our second step posters are up. I can hear students using the language, right? Saying, when they come into my office and there might be a conflict, right? Because they're our first responders
Mhm.
to conflict. I mean, that sounds a little scary to say,
Well, that's a
but
really
they
interesting way to frame it. I like it. Yeah.
and with all respect to our real first responders,
Mhm.
they are because they're the ones that, these this peer-to-peer dialogue that's happening, we're there, right? And
Mhm.
we're facilitating, but all in all, what our ultimate goal is for our students to be independent, right? And
Mhm.
we want them to have the tools to be able to disintegrate the conflict right there
Mhm.
on their own. I've seen it happen. I've seen it
Mhm.
happen with the smallest of our learners,
Mhm.
up to our bigger learners as well. So I think that just reinforcing those skills and I wanted to say too, I meant to mention, they might be our first responders, but the helpers, right, are families too.
Yeah.
And the connection with the home links that we're able to send home, um, our parents too are starting to hear the language more often. So
Mhm.
it's really just building up, everyone around them to hear that that the skills are not just used here, but they're reinforced outside of the
Yeah.
classroom.
So you've already been given like a ton of awesome tips
I
here.
hope so.
But I'm hoping as we kind of wrap up our time together today, that if you do you have like a nugget of wisdom or a particular thing. There's a lot of educators who are just starting their work with Second Step or are revitalizing programs that have gone a little bit pear-shaped. What are some concrete things that you think that a school or a individual classroom teacher could do to kind of get started on making a journey towards kind of the whole school environment that you're putting together?
I think that, so I'm going to start broad and then I'll go into the nuggets. I think that I had said before, it takes patience. This program works, but it must be practiced, and it's a mindset, right? Like, it's not, just going through the lessons and teaching the program as it's built. It's data driven. It's built the way for a reason, although, we are the role models, right? We're the role models, not just in a student's academics, but also in their social emotional learning. So just, developing your mindset over time and giving yourself grace. It's not an overnight fix. The program is there, and it's there to help guide us. It guides us through the different competencies, but again, it's not going to happen overnight. I think something that we've done here at Kamensky too is we've really gotten to know each other as staff members. And I think that's really important. When you get to know your staff and their passion and their stories, like I said before, that then leads to the students wanting to get to know you and get to know your story and your passions and to the community and so on, right? And then that builds up all the supports that the students are looking for. As the program in and of itself, I think find a champion in your building. Find somebody that this is their passion. They do truly believe in SEL and Second Step. Find somebody that, if they don't know the program front to back, that want to get to know the program, front to back, and then build a committee, because it's tough. And when our committee, since we have, I have a committee of these wonderful ladies that they have so many great ideas, to the point where I start just taking notes. I'm like, oh my gosh, wow, that's great. And just all these beautiful, colorful, wonderful things and celebrations that we can do. So I would say, if you have that opportunity, try to build a committee. So that way you can execute the ideas, because one person, it's too much for one person. And then I would say, work on your mindset, aligning your work with your passion. I know that we oftentimes say, well, it's a work-life balance. Wow. It's not necessarily a balance. Very often we're not balanced, let's be honest, right? But what we can do is we can align our why. We can think back to our why. Well, we want students to be independent. Well, I also want my own children to be independent. So that's an alignment, right? I have 2 daughters who, I want to teach them independence. Well, that carries right over to my professional life, because I want the same for my students. So really just, connecting, with an alignment. And then there was one thing I wanted to mention from Second Step that I really enjoy, and that's that practice of, giving the students the chance to be independent, exercise it and work on it and practice it, and then go back and reflect. And I think that when students can see that cyclical movement of, the reinforcement and then the reflection, I think it works really well. And then they can connect it to conflict out at recess, or maybe even at the park, later on in the day. And I think that that's really important for our students to feel successful. Well,
Sarah, thank you so much. This has been awesome to get to talk to you. I really, it's so inspiring to be able to hear about the work you're doing and all of the ways that you and your colleagues are supporting your students.
I think so too. And I can't wait to see what other schools are doing as well, because I think that in the end, we all have the ultimate goal, right? We want to see our students be successful.
Well, next month we'll be having another one of these spotlights, so you'll be able to tune in and hear about another great story. But until then, I just want to thank you so much for joining us, and I want to thank everybody who is out watching this right now for joining us as well. If you are in our Second Step Educator community right now, you don't need to be told about this. You're watching. But if you're not, if you're on Facebook or YouTube or Twitter and you're watching this, we thank you very much, and we would love to have you come and join us and join in the conversation in our Second Step Educator community, where you can connect with amazing educators like Sarah, and learn about how people are using the Second Step program to support their students and their colleagues across the country and around the world. So until then, it's been my pleasure. Thank you all so much. Take care and be well.